All right, welcome everyone. There looks like we've got 17, 18 people jumping on. We're excited to have you guys. This is our full disclosure, our um, very first YouTube live that we're going to do to try to reach our people. All right, so I think all you guys can hear me. If you guys are noticing any technical difficulties, because this is our first time, if you wouldn't mind, throw it in the chat. I have Laura Thompson with me. She is sending me the questions as they come up, and we're gonna get right through. When the questions stop, we're gonna stop. But we're excited to hear from you guys. We're excited to talk about investing and how we can help you guys. So there we go. Sean says this is awesome. Can't wait. Thank you. Thanks for that feedback. If we don't interact, I won't know what questions you guys have. So thanks for jumping into the live chat. So we're going to want to know by the end of this live stream if you enjoyed this format. You know, is it something that you want us to continue for you guys? We want to reach as many of our people as we possibly can. Does this platform work for you guys? We've been enjoying YouTube because we get a lot of really good analytics. But at the same time, we're not attached to any one specific. So we want to know what's best for our people that way. So Laura's monitoring the chat. I'm going to give you guys a quick little intro to myself. And quick reminder, those of you who are not subscribed to our channel, please take a minute really quick, subscribe and turn all notifications on so that you know when we're doing our next live events and when we drop content for you guys. So without getting into much other detail, I want to share a little bit. Those of you guys who have not heard my story yet, I feel like I repeat this once a day. So I apologize if anybody else has already heard this a bunch of times, but my name is Caleb Hayes, and I read this book. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but it's called How We Made $1 Million Recycling Great Old Houses. I was 12 years old when my dad gave it to me, and it was written in the 1940s. So that was my first exposure to real estate investing. After I read that book, I absolutely fell in love with investing, all things investing. So I started to consume flipping books, rental books, commercial books, anything that you can think of in and around real estate. Bought my first investment property when I was 18 years old. I tried to buy it when I was a sophomore in high school, and my dad said, no, you got to wait till you graduate. You know, why can't you want a tattoo or, you know, a car or a truck or something like that? I wanted to buy real estate. And he said, wait till you graduate. So 2 weeks after graduating high school, I bought my first investment property. And then after that, about 2 months later, I bought a house that I rented out while I was in college, which is known now as house hacking. I didn't know what that didn't have that term back then. But house hacking, and I rented out the rooms while I was in college, and actually put me through college. I was debt free. So real estate investing, I started very young, and I'm excited to share with you what I've learned over those years. Today, where we are today in the investment world, we have, by the end of this year, we'll have probably $31 million in real estate under our control that we own inside of our group here. Most of it is office, retail. We've got about, by the end of this year, we should have about 225,000 square feet of office and retail. And no, office and retail sectors are not dead. You got to be careful because a lot of them are dying. A lot of those investments today are dying, but we're still doing well with it, and it's still a great thing to invest in. We also own 20 some units, actually probably close to 30 rental units now, and we flip houses. So we've probably flipped over 300 houses in my career, and that's kind of where we are today. So from high school to today, that's where we are. So let's get started with some of these questions and see what's going on with you guys. I'm going to start with Anna Robertson. Thank you so much for your questions. You actually submitted them early. You asked, which do you recommend with your first investment, investing with your own money or investing with someone else's money? I'm just going to give you my personal belief here, Anna. When you're going through and investing, I very early on, my personal belief was use your own money, use your own resources, because when your butt's on the line, you're gonna make sure you check your numbers. You're gonna make sure everything's really, really dialed in. And I'm of the one that I don't ever use anybody else's money until I've risked my own first. So it's just a personal belief of mine. But now that being said, I would highly encourage you that if you have a partner that has done a lot of investing and you haven't, and they say, hey, I want to put the money up, and you put the work in, that's a different story, because that person has experience and that person has knowledge that can benefit you. So that'd be my only caveat to my advice there with using someone else's money. I would use somebody else's money. I'll give you an example, specific example here, Anna. If you're buying a house that's a flip and you're going to flip it, and somebody else has flipped 10, 15, 20 other houses and they've got the money, and they say, hey, I want to bring the money, you handle the contractors and do the flip, then that would be, I would advise you to go into that as like a joint venture, because you have somebody with wisdom, somebody that's done other deals that you can learn from and accelerate your career. Your next question, Anna, was what's your advice on banking, financing, investing versus investors funding? I've personally always used the bank. My first flip I actually did with credit cards. Do not recommend that. But I didn't have any money, so I used the bank's money to get the property, and then I used credit cards to renovate it on 0%, for 12 months, and I sold it and paid them off. Not what I'd recommend. However, it was what it took to fund my passion at the time. So I would advise you towards bank financing if you can afford it. Investor funding can be very, very expensive. I'm assuming you're getting at like private money. Private money can be very, very expensive. A couple points on the front end, and then 10, 12, 14% interest sometimes. So my advice is if you can get bank financing, do it. Anna, our other question is, how would you calculate a commercial lease building needing a lot of reno and seeing a return on whether or not it's worth the investment long term? This is a great question. Actually, you guys, I just noticed that if my camera dies, and if I get kicked off live, just hang tight. I'll pop back in with my other camera. My battery says it's blinking. So if I lose you guys, I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. How would you calculate a commercial lease on a building that needs a lot of reno? I treat commercial buildings a lot like I treat residential. I go into it knowing the reno that I need prior to buying the building. And once that, so I'll give you an example. We bought a $350,000 building in Appleton. We knew that it needed about 350,000 in renovation. And then we knew once we filled it up, it'd be worth north of $1 million. It actually appraised at 1.2 million. So we bought it for 350. We put 350 into it, and it was worth the appraised value was 1.2 at the end. So we knew that buying it for that, putting that renovation in, we're instantly creating a lot of equity. $400,000 north of $300,000 or $400,000 in equity. And we said that we believe that risk was worth it. The building was vacant, other than one or two tenants, and we filled the rest up. So I hope that helps kind of your thought process as you're looking into commercial. All right, our next question from Sean is, best kind of real estate investments for today's market and or 12 months from today need a strategy with this pandemic and market shift? Great question, Sean. And what you really need to, what you really should be looking at is not necessarily what the market is going to do. It's a great idea to have an idea what it's going to do or where it's going to go. But what you really should look for here is really understand what it takes to buy a great deal in any market. So what I mean by that is that, let's say you're buying a commercial building today and it's worth 500,000. Okay. That's what it's worth if you put it on the market at 500,000. If you if you're a really good investor, you don't want to buy that asset for 500,000 because you want to create instant equity when you purchase it. So you want to buy it for it's worth 500,000. You want to buy it for like 250, 300. So that way, if the market drops by 50%, your equity still protects you in any type of shifting market. So the thing that I would be educating myself on in terms of a strategy is looking for what is a really good deal today in today's market. And in order to know what something's a really good deal is you have to fully understand what things are trading for. So if you're going to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, well, what is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house worth on that street in today's market? And you just have to make sure you buy it at a severe discount to what it's actually worth. You make your money when you buy real estate, you guys. You don't necessarily, you can either buy value or create value. You got to buy it at a discount. That's the best strategy to protect yourself against a market shift. Because if you buy it 50 cents on the dollar, the market can go down by 50%. You're still protected. So I hope that helps. Thanks for doing this. No problem. Julie, yes, we will drop that title. I think she already did. For Hope. Lisa, great question. She's asking, how many rental properties did you have before you hired a property management company? I never wanted to get a call that the toilets were leaking. I never wanted to get the call that, hey, I can't pay rent. So I actually hired a property manager right away. I'm sorry, I did my first couple myself, found out I did not enjoy it, sold those properties, and then I bought with the intent of hiring the property manager right out the gate. So the biggest thing I hear people say is that I don't want to be responsible for tenants. I don't want to have to take calls at midnight. I completely agree. I'm actually the world's worst landlord when it comes to that. Somebody says, hey, Caleb, I can't pay rent this month. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'm just very I say no problem. And that's why I need a property manager. So make sure that every rental that you buy, you build in a property management fee, anywhere from 6% to 10% to 12% of gross rents. That way you can, whether you hire someone or you don't, if you don't hire someone, that's just extra cash flow in your pocket, but build it in there. So if 3 years from now you're sick of it, you can hire that property manager. So my advice, Lisa, is I would plan on having that property manager right away, and I would plan on having the intent of paying for one right before buying it every time. All right. Julie says we are not handy people and we will have to hire out virtually all the improvements. Does it make sense to invest under these circumstances? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm handy and I used to do the work myself, but I realized that was not the long-term. All right, I think I lost them. Can you see me in there?
Yep.
Okay, so how do I stream a different camera? Do I have to do it again? There we go. All right, thanks for hanging tight, everybody. We just had to switch cameras over. We're still testing an external camera versus my computer camera. All right. So back to Julie's comment on we're not handy people and we have to hire virtually everything out for improvements. Does it make sense to invest under these circumstances? Yes, the answer, Julie, is absolutely yes. You just have to make sure that when you're buying your property, you go into it with the intent of hiring those people. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. When I was flipping houses early on in my career, I was able to do all the work myself and get it done much cheaper. Okay, so the renovation, instead of it being $40,000 to hire someone, I could do it all for $20,000. So that gave me a competitive edge because I was handy and I could buy more properties. I know some great real estate investors that they do 3 to 4 a year and they do all the work themselves. They can pay way more for property than I can because I fully hire everything out. I hire everything out. So you can do it, Julie. You just have to make sure you budget before you go into that asset, whatever you're buying, the flip or the rental, and just make sure that you have built in your budget to pay other people to do it. And you absolutely can. It makes you less competitive against those people who can do the work themselves. However, we buy properties all the time where we hire it out. So Lisa asked, have you considered self-storage units? Yes, I have. I think every investor on the planet has considered it at some point. It was really, really hot a while ago. I never jumped into it just because I didn't really want to dedicate the time to learning a new business like that. Self-storage is a new business compared to residential, rentals, commercial, and those different pieces. I jumped more from residential to commercial, not necessarily residential to storage units. I know some investors that do incredibly well with it, but it hasn't been I haven't made it an investment strategy of mine. So I hope that answers your question. There's a very good book called Crushing It in Commercial Real Estate that will speak to that. They actually have a formula that tells you if your area you want to invest in self-storage is oversaturated or not. So I hope that brings a lot of value to you. Hi, Caleb. As a first-time investor, is it a good idea to start with Airbnb vacation type properties versus rentals? Okay, I've been like the biggest, great question. I've been the biggest promoter of not buying Airbnbs. We've got videos of me 6 months ago, a year ago, kind of telling investors, basically, I think Airbnb is the first in any type of downturn, the first one to get wiped out and the reason I think that is because if you're going to have to choose between paying your mortgage or spending $1,000 on an Airbnb vacation that you wanted to take forever, anytime times get really, really hard, the first thing people do is they cut their discretionary spending, which is vacation rentals and things like that. So personally, I know some investors that do amazing at it. It's never been my focus because I believe that it was the first thing that would get chopped off. Now, I do believe in Airbnbs if you buy it with the intent of the worst case scenario, you can rent it out as like a single family residence and still make money. So what I mean by that is you could have a rental that rents out at $1,500 a month Airbnb and you make really good cash flow. However, if that Airbnb gets slashed and you can't get people to book, can you still rent it out for $900 a month to maybe a family or to someone that can rent it and you still make money and you still cash flow? If the answer is yes to that, then my opinion is go nuts because people always need a place to live and your fallback plan is the rentals. When I think people get in trouble with Airbnb is when they spend $500,000 on a house that only rents for $1,000 on a regular rental instead of an Airbnb. That's when you can, I think, get into a lot of trouble. So I've always avoided it. Thank you so much for the question. What strategy with lower capital what's a strategy with lower capital while starting to invest? Do you suggest rental or flip first? Okay, Chance, so I personally am a big proponent of flipping first. That's what I did. I was so focused on that. I flipped for probably 10 to 12 years before I ever really bought a long-term hold. The reason I did that was, sounds like a lot like your situation, I just didn't have a lot of capital. Coming out of college, I was debt-free, but I just didn't have, I think I had $10,000 when I moved to Green Bay, kind of saved up for investing. So I didn't really necessarily have a big pot to use to purchase properties. And I said, well, I have to flip first. I use that to generate cash. And then I saved that money. And then after 10 to 12 years, that's how focused I was on that strategy of flipping first. Then I started buying long-term holds. And I didn't care what the market was doing. I probably could have done a lot better if in 2011 to 2012, I just bought and held. I didn't enjoy it as much because I like being debt-free. So I do a lot of debt-free investing as well. Hey, Caleb, looking to buy a flip house, worried about the declining home values in a shifting market. Yes, absolutely, Gary, thank you. What are your tips for staying ahead of this when pricing out a project? Okay, if you're ever buying a property, Carrie, that is, you're buying it with the intent of appreciation. Okay, I know some people in Florida back in 2005, 2006, 2007 bought properties. They bought condos for $250,000, and their plan was to sell it 6 months later for $350,000 because at that time home prices were just shooting up. That's called gambling. So I don't advise buying a flip house if you plan on just because home prices are good today, they're going to be good tomorrow. I would kind of refer back to the commercial investing. And when I first started talking about this is your declining home values is an absolute thing that could happen today. at any moment. We just don't know of when that market will take a hard shift. Right now, there's limited supply of housing, which is causing upward pricing pressure and demand. But my tip for staying ahead of pricing that project out, you have to buy 50 to 60 cents on the dollar. If the house is worth 100,000, you have to buy it for 50 or 60,000. Like you can't. And if your house is worth 100,000 and you buy that investment property for 100,000 and the market takes a hard shift, you're gonna get smacked. It just it creates a buffer. It's a lot harder to do. Okay, it's a lot harder to do. Find a house that's worth 100,000 today for 50 to 60,000. That's why our acquisitions team has to evaluate anywhere from 20, 30, 40 houses sometimes, just so that they can find that really good deal. Just don't get a limiting belief thinking that those deals aren't out there. Those deals are absolutely out there. Sometimes I'll go back and teach at my old college sometimes with one of the professors, and I'll ask the class, I'll say, hey, raise your hand if you think you could walk out this classroom today and make $20,000. And half the class will raise their hand and half the class won't. And I said, those of you who raised your hand, you are right. You can walk out this classroom and you can buy a piece of real estate that is undervalued by $20,000, and you essentially created $20,000 in very simplistic terms. And then I say, those of you who did not raise your hand, you are also correct, because you don't believe it exists, so you're not going to go look for it. Therefore, you will never find it. And that applies very heavily to investing. So I hope that kind of helps answer that question. All right, Hope asks, what risks and benefits should I consider when looking at my first long-term residential purchase, being a single family versus a multifamily? All right, Hope, this is a question that you have to answer. I'll repeat it again. What risks and benefits should I consider when looking to purchase my first long-term residential purchase? This all depends on you and what type of investor you are. I know some investors that they only want to buy 5%. They only want 5% return on their money. Meaning, if they put $100,000 out, they want $5,000 back in cash flow per month, and they're good with that. I know some investors that go, no, I want a 30% return on my money, and then you have to force the deals to get you that return. So that risk versus benefits is a question that you have to answer. Meaning, how do you plan on holding the money accountable and at what rate? And then that will lead you into single family or multifamily. You kind of got to work backwards. So if you go, I'm looking for a 30% return on my money, which I would highly encourage for those of you who are out there going, I don't have a lot of capital. What that means is it's going to take about 3 years for you to get your down payment back from that asset. And those deals are out there. So you just got to look for them. All right, Victoria, do you have the banks for distressed or foreclosed homes, or use HUD Home Store? Do you go to the banks for distressed or foreclosed? Okay. No, I don't buy HUD foreclosures. And do you go to the banks for distressed or foreclosed homes? Yes, we have relationships with banks. You can call the banks and say, hey, which properties do you have that are in distress right now? I'd be interested in picking them up. We've bought a lot of properties like that in the past. You just build relationships with the banks and the people who deal with the distressed assets of that bank, and you build that relationship with them. And then a lot of times you can pick those assets up before anybody else, and a lot of times even before they hit the market. What makes a good property manager? Trustworthiness. So what makes a good property manager? It has to be somebody that you can trust. What to look for when you're hiring a property manager? It's a lot like hiring a really good staff member. You want somebody with a great reputation. You want somebody firm but compassionate. Like, they have to understand that there are unique situations that you have somebody that's a tenant for 20 years and they just get into a rough spot. They have to have compassion in those, but they also have to be firm to protect your assets. So trustworthiness, I would go first when looking for a property manager. And then you want to interview multiple. You'll learn which ones, if you interview multiple property managers, what they're looking for. Julie, Airbnb is a short-term rentals, know the local zoning and ordinances. Yes, very good comment. Airbnb, there's a lot of municipalities that have shut down Airbnbs because they don't want them in their area. So you got to be very, very careful with investing in those as well. Thank you for that, Julie. Yeah, zoning can absolutely knock you out. What's your experience and advice on sheriff sales? I love sheriff sales. We've bought many, many properties from sheriff sales. To this day, we probably buy 20 to 30% of our properties from sheriff sales. Sheriff sales, you have to be very, very careful. So this is my disclosure. You do not buy your first property as a sheriff sale. I didn't buy my first sheriff sale till I was probably investing for 1.5 to 2 years. I just knew of too many horror stories of people buying properties thinking it's free and clear, and it turns out that there is a federal lien on the property for 40 grand. If you buy a sheriff sale inappropriately, you're cutting that check for 40 grand that you might not have known about. I have gotten smacked on like $8,000 water bills sometimes, you guys. Sheriff sales is for an experienced investor who understands kind of all the process around what could happen and what could go south with those sheriff sales. Now, that does not mean that you should be afraid of them. I went to sheriff sales for a year before I ever bought one, meaning I went to every single sheriff sale and I sat there and I said, okay, if I was to bid today on a sheriff sale, I would buy 123 Main Street. And then I would watch 123 Main Street and I would watch what it gets sold for. And I'd say, okay, I'm going to bid on 123 Main Street and I would pay $40,000 for it. And then I would watch an experienced investor buy 123 Main Street for $40,000. And I go, okay, I'm on the right track. And then I would go, okay, I'd buy 1216, South Marquette Drive. And I would pay $75,000 for it. And I would sit there and I'd watch the experienced investors who I know bought all the time, and they would buy it, sure enough, for 70 or 75. And I'm like, I'm on the right track. And I did not go and bid and buy a sheriff sale property until I had hit probably 10, 15 times. Like I hit it right every time along with the experienced people. So that was how I introduced myself, and I still got smacked after doing it. So you can do it. Be very, very cautious. Be very, very cautious with it. What does your acquisitions team look at when you purchase? The criteria. Awesome. Well, I can take this in a bunch of different ways. I can take it with, let's take it flipping first. So the acquisitions team, just to give you a rough idea, if we know that a property is worth $250,000, once it's done, it's the ARV. The acquisitions team knows that they got to buy it anywhere from 100, maybe up to 150,000. That 50% of that future value. That's just like a really rough criteria on a flip. So, okay, it's going to be worth 250. Do we think we have a chance at buying that property anywhere from 100 to 150,000? If the answer is yes, it's like, okay, let's dig deeper and get get going for that. On the rental side, the criteria for if I'm going to hold, I used to have incredibly strict criteria where I wanted 33% or greater return on my money. Meaning if I put money down on to buy a rental, I wanted 30% of that cash back at the end of the year. So that in 3 years, I had that money. Now that really constricts your purchasing because that means you're buying like a phenomenal deal. So the criteria on like a residential hold was somewhere around there. On the commercial side, I have a couple different criteria on the commercial side. Number one, we have to buy value or we have to create value. Meaning, if the building's worth $1 million, I got to be buying it for 500, 600, 700,000 potentially, depending on the deal. So that's kind of the rough criteria. We got to buy value. Second thing is it has to cash flow. Okay, and typically I want 10 plus return on more of my commercial assets, anywhere from 10 caps to 20 caps, where we want that money returning back to us on a cash on cash return. And then, or we create value. Like in any real estate deal of where you guys want to build wealth is you have to create value in that asset, meaning you force it. If you paint the house, it could be worth a little more money. If you change out the flooring, it could be worth a little more money. If you change the kitchen out, it could be worth a little more money. That's the point of flipping, is you buy something distressed, you add value to it, and then you sell it. Commercials the very same way. We got to either create value or we have to buy value. Now with a commercial asset, if that happens, where we'll buy a commercial asset and we're not getting those returns, we try to force it by putting in a stronger tenant, are doing those different pieces. So that gives you a rough idea of what our acquisition team looks at. And I think we could share, we got another video on our YouTube page for flipping. We got a video that talks about like the criteria of a flip. If you guys want to check that out, where it just breaks down our spreadsheet. I think we have our spreadsheet in it as well, where you can just literally take your numbers and plug it into our spreadsheet and you have all our criteria for flips. We should actually shoot a video like that for rentals as well, because I got that all too. So maybe we'll try to do that as well. All right, Jessica, my rental house is almost paid off. Would you sell the rental property to pay off home mortgage, or would you invest in another rental? Great question. First of all, congratulations on paying your rental house off. That's amazing. The question here that you got to ask yourself, Jessica, is there's a great return on equity calculation that you can do where with that rental house, if it brings in $10,000 after all your expenses and true cash flow, and let's say the rental house is worth $100,000, your return on equity is called 10%. So this is just part of holding your money accountable. So I'll say that again. If the house is worth $100,000, your rental house, and let's say it brings you cash flow of $10,000 per year, that's a 10% return on your equity. The question you got to ask yourself, Jessica, is if you pull that rental house money off and you put it in your home, what would be that same calculation for your mortgage? I'm a big proponent, even if it's like half, I'm a big proponent of paying your house off. I don't believe humans were meant to have personal debt. Like I just have this fundamental belief that we should not have personal debt. Like it's constricting, it costs us our freedom, it costs us really, it makes us make poor choices at times, it limits our opportunities. And I think it's not in our design. I believe that God designed us to be free. So I'm a big proponent of paying your mortgage off, all your vehicles, any credit card, any personal debt that you have to pay for. I encourage people to do that. These are great questions. Yes, thank you. Yeah, keep asking questions, you guys. Otherwise, if we run out of questions, we'll end it early. Proper legal way to write offers and listings as a realtor who is working with friends in separate investing LLCs. Okay, Chance, I'm going to drive you back to your brokers in your market, the broker in your office. But there is, it gets tough, and there is some gray area when you're a real estate professional and you have a license. But I don't want to give legal advice, or I don't really want to get into that right now, just because it's definitely a gray area. It's a question that I've had multiple different times, and just to be completely transparent, I still to this day don't know how to actually truly answer it the correct way, because there's just a lot of gray with it. So best investing books for someone who hasn't started. Oh my gosh, you guys, I have like literally every single investing book. Actually, I'll give you this one because it's an easy read. Most of the people watching are real estate professionals. There's a great book called Tips and Traps When Negotiating Real Estate that had a big impact on myself when I was getting started at investing, because it taught me from an agent's perspective how to invest and negotiate really, really well. Any negotiating books that you guys can read are absolutely worth the money, because you might save $5,000 on a negotiation that you learn from a $15 book. So that's a phenomenal return on your investment. So, I'll try to maybe post or do a breakdown of some of my favorite books, because my wife gets on me all the time. I'm kind of like I have this closet in the basement, and it's literally full with real estate investing books. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I think you guys probably have heard of that one. That's really, really good. Once you're done with that one, Cash Flow Quadrant is really, really good. Tips and Traps When Negotiating Real Estate. It's an easy read based in stories. So that one's really good. Crushing It in Commercial. That one's a little bit more advanced, but very, very good. Yeah, those are the ones I'd recommend. All right, advice on buying a quad or an 8-plex over a duplex or a single family. All right, so I own single family, I own duplexes, I own an 8-plex and a quad. I don't really know how to answer that one, just because it kind of depends on your strategy. I know some people that they only want single family homes for many, many different reasons. And I know some people that like duplexes, and I know some people that love 8 units because there's only one roof over 8 units versus having 8 roofs over, 8 single family properties. So I think it depends on your aggressiveness to what you're looking to do. So, hey, Julie, besides getting socked with $8,000 water bill and share sales, what else would you do differently if you could go back in time? So what I would do, man, that's a great question. So what I would do is I would go sit down, Julie, with a foreclosure attorney, somebody who understands the process, and say, I want you to educate me in the simplest terms possible for educating me on the foreclosure properties. So go sit down with them, and they're going to say, okay, when A happens, then B. When B happens, C or D could happen after D, and then they'll line it all out for you for your local area of how it actually is broke down. And then what I would do is I would ask myself, okay, how do I at each one of those stages insert myself in to possibly be buying that property, that foreclosure, because you can get very good deals on them. So that was what I would do. I would go back, I would sit down and say, other than I think was really good advice was sit there and watch which other top investors are buying. But then I would actually go sit down with a foreclosure attorney and educate myself on the process of foreclosures. Once you have that knowledge, then you can use that to invest differently. And having a very good knowledge of the foreclosure process would have avoided me from getting soaked with an $8,000 water bill. Because after that process, that $8,000 lesson, we now make sure we call all the municipalities and all the bills prior to going to bid on it now to avoid just that. So great title companies, you guys, Caliber Title is a great one, can help you kind of purchase too and help you understand whether the property is going to be free and clear or if there's some other things that could pop up. How will you know when it is the right time to invest? How will you know when it's the right time to invest? There is really you will never ever have a perfect time to invest. I know when the wrong time to invest in is waiting for the right time. And what I mean by that is until you get out there and do some deals, that's when the real education happens. You can read every flipping book, you can listen to different people like myself talk about it, you can do those different things, but until you get out there and get in the trenches of investing, you learn so much. Like that $8,000 water bill, yeah, it absolutely hurt, but it also helped me avoid, many, many other water bills in the future, or knowing what I was getting into. So there really is no right time to invest. Things that I would think about is I would think about things like, okay, are my monthly expenses for my home taken care of? Basically, do I have a safety fund in and around my family? Do I have cash there waiting for my family if, this deal goes south? Another thing I would think about is do I actually have some of my own capital saved up? So one of the reasons I say saving is one of the best habits you can learn as a real estate investor, because if you can't save money, money is your safety fund. When you run out of capital and you're investing, that's when you lose everything. When you have these safety funds or capital to invest in, it buys you time to make pivots and changes. So the right time to invest is there's never ever going to be a perfect time to invest. Get out there, make some mistakes, be careful, partner with people who know what they're doing. Your follow-up question is there a certain amount of cash I should have saved up? 3 to 6 months personal expenses. Okay, so if it costs you $1,000 a month for your home, have 3 to 6 months minimum personally. And then I would highly encourage you to, whatever you invest in, same thing, have 3 to 6 months of that rental property money saved up. Whereas if you had no tenant for 6 months, you could pay it out of that cash just to buy you time to make it happen. Can you touch on the way you protected your assets as you invested in additional doors? Okay, my accountant told me to, when I'm first investing, he's like, just do a couple in your name. Don't go forming all these different companies, these different LLCs. He's like, understand first if you like it and you're good at it and you want to do it. If you want, and then after that point, we'll form an LLC. So there's multiple different ways that you can protect yourself. These are great questions for your accountant, but the way that I did it was put them in my own name first, did a couple in my own name first. Once I realized I was going to do this for a very, very long time, then we formed the company. We formed an LLC. After the LLC, the company became big enough to where we had to make it an S corp, and have your accountant kind of explain why you might take that path, and your path might be very, very different than that. So. That is how I would answer that question. All right, you guys, I think I'm getting caught up on questions. If there's any follow-up ones that you guys have, I'm here, so we can talk about it. Other ideas. On maybe joint venturing, you guys. I encourage people to joint venture all the time, especially for your first couple. So like if you're thinking about joint venturing on a property, here's my criteria for joint ventures. One of the partners should have experience in investing. I've seen so many brothers partner with cousins, cousins partner with uncles, friends partner with friends, and none of them have ever flipped houses before. I will tell people right blank to their face, I think that's a massive mistake. And the reason for that, and you should always in your joint venture have one person who makes the decisions. I'll give you an example. Everybody that I partner with, I always have I have the control. I mean, they might get half the profits, but I have full control to do whatever I want with the property just because I've earned that. And I know that, like, I don't want another investor trying to come in and pick out carpet or pick out, anything, do anything with that. It slows the deal down. They trust me, I trust them, just like I'm running with it. And I've been a part of many joint ventures where I've given the control to another investor that I know really well. And I said, hey, you go flip these two houses, I'll flip these two. And then we meet back once the job's done and we compare notes and things like that. So that's my tip for joint venturing. Is there any way to get around the taxes on flipping? No, you get taxed heavily on flipping. I know you can't do a 1031 exchange, but is there something I should know that I don't? Great question, Lisa. I get slammed every year with taxes on these, but the way my accountant explained it to me, when you buy a flip with the intent to flip, you're no different than a shoe store owner who owns shoes. You buy the shoe for $10, you sell them for $20. That's not a capital gain event. That's a purchasing a product and selling that product. That's how the government views it. So you need to find a very, very good real estate accountant, and they will help you with that. Flipping, you can get taxed really heavy, but then that's when the long-term holds come in play. When you guys start buying long-term holds, maybe you're flipping a lot and you start buying long-term holds at that point and doing a thing called a cost segregation to accelerate your depreciation. That piece can offset a lot of those taxes, but that's down the road a ways. Just take your smack on taxes. If you guys make 10 grand on a flip, I pray you're holding 30% of that in an account called your tax account. If you don't do that, you're gonna have a rude awakening the next year. And I've seen some investors get in hundreds of thousands of dollars into the government, taking them to climb out of it. I've had people suggest that in our area, due to the low home values, is not good for investing. Thoughts? I can invest in any market, Julie, anywhere in the world. You could drop me in the middle of, a small town America somewhere. You could drop me somewhere and I could find a way to make investing work in that area. You have to be extra careful in a lot of those areas. But the question I would ask, you've had the way you wrote it is, I've had people suggest that in the area, due to the low home values, it is not good for investing. They might be right, Julie, but my question for that person would be, how many investments have you done in this area? Because you want to be careful you don't consume somebody else's limiting belief. I have the belief that if I went into that area, that same area maybe that you're talking about, I could do investing. I believe that. I actually know which area you're talking about. But you have to be extra careful, right? If the houses are selling for 100,000 in your area, let's say they're selling for 70,000 once they're fixed up, you need to buy them for 20, put 25 into it, and then sell it for 65, even though that they're listed at 70. Even in slow areas that have really slow turnover, you just have to discount your product much much lower than what the competition is, so yours sells faster. That's all. I mean, I was flipping houses, you guys, in 2010 when nobody was buying houses. I would go to the sheriff's sale. There would be 30 to 40 properties at sheriff's sale, you guys, and there would be 3 to 4 investors. I go to sheriff's sale today, there's 30 to 40 investors and 3 properties. So the only way you survive in a market where nobody's buying houses or in an area where nobody's buying houses, discount your product greatly. So if the houses are selling at 70, you make sure your flip is done and beautiful and move-in ready for 60 or 55. And that's how you can protect yourself in that. So I'm hearing a good accountant and a good attorney, correct. A good contractor is the other person you should be getting good advice from. A really good contractor is somebody else you're going to need on your team. Hope. So good accountant, good attorney, good contractor, good lender. You're going to need a good lender. Victoria, trends you are seeing, areas or categories you'd stay away from as a new investor. I'd stay away from commercial right now. Commercial is going to get gutted over the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to be a graveyard. I believe that. As a new investor, I would just stay away from it. Negotiating tips for making an offer. I love negotiating. Negotiating is like my boxing arena, but like they don't know they're boxing with me. I absolutely, it's a game to me. I try to do as well as I possibly can on it. And when I have that type of mentality over a career of 10, 15, 20 years of buying properties, even if you save $1,000 on each property, it adds up to massive amounts over your career. So negotiating tips for making an offer, there's probably 100. Some of my favorite negotiating tips are I will go in and I'll just do a wish list offer. I know it drives us agents sometimes crazy when that happens, but I'll come in and I'll ask for everything. And I try to flush out the things that aren't valuable to them and find out what is valuable to me. A lot of times too, a tip for negotiating is when you're about to buy something yourself, you guys, before you ever get into negotiating, so you don't get sucked into emotion, write down on a piece of paper the most you're willing to pay based on the numbers of the deal, and then start way behind that number and work your way up to it, and have somebody help you hold accountable, because you don't want to get caught up in the emotion of buying. That's something that happens at sheriff sales because it's a bidding process. Sometimes there's competitive nature in people and they will bid way more than they should of what makes sense. So a good tip for negotiating, write down what you're going to pay and that's it. Because before emotion gets involved, if you want to be competitive in getting the deal, you know logically what makes sense. That's something we haven't really talked about just yet, but you guys, your relationship with fear and your relationship with your emotions is crucial to becoming a good real estate investor. If you don't have your emotions in control, really good investing is not about not having emotion. Really good investing is about having the right emotion at the right time. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Fear is the thing that destroys wealth and destroys you buying anything more than anything I've ever seen before. You could become afraid, therefore you never look for it, and therefore you never see it all the way through. Write down what you're going to pay for it, bid all the way up to it, pay it. As soon as you get the property under contract, bring fear off the shelf. So I park fear. Once I get something under contract, I say, okay, fear, come back here. Show me what I'm not seeing. Show me how I'm going to get destroyed in this asset or this purchase. And they'll say, here, 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 here. And then I check off eliminating that risk in the deal. And then I take fear and I put them back on the shelf. And then I say, great, I feel good with all the things I think can go wrong with it. I'm still going to purchase the asset and move forward. But I use fear quite a bit. And sometimes even in negotiating, there's times where you should keep your energy really, really low. And there's sometimes you should use energy in negotiating as a negotiating strategy. Another favorite thing I like to do, if somebody's offering on my property and they'll say, hey, I'll pay you $200,000 for that property, I don't say a word. I don't say a word. Like I just let, until they speak again, I don't speak again. It can be 5 minutes. It can be really awkward. But it's one of my favorite things to do when somebody says, hey, I'll pay you $200,000. And I'm just quiet. Don't say anything. And they will backpedal. They usually negotiate against themselves because the awkwardness does the heavy lifting in it. Trends you're seeing, areas to stay away from. I think I talked about that. Commercial, I'd stay away from. Real estate, even residential. So guys, I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen. We're not building enough houses across the country, so therefore pricing is going to continue to go up. I think investing for a couple more years in residential will be okay, but you got to watch that. Home prices or lumber prices are going up, and eventually buyers and builders are going to say, I'm backing away from taking on more builds or building more properties, and it could have an impact. Can we send you a property we are looking at to get your thoughts? Absolutely. Yeah. The only thing that I'll ask you with that one is get it under contract first, Victoria. Get it under contract first, and then just make sure you're protected in that contract. So if you guys want me to look at something, I don't want to look at things that you don't have. What's the word I'm looking for? You don't have it locked up. Get it locked up. And you guys go, that's kind of crazy, but that's the way that I operate. I won't even look at properties our acquisition team is looking at until they have it under contract, and we can go, okay, now let's break the deal down. And they know to build in those things to protect them: home inspection, financing contingency, bank approval, things like that. So absolutely would love to help you guys out. Sean loves this format, very informative. Thank you, Sean. Thanks, Caleb. Yes, this is great. Okay, we will, yeah, thanks. We need the feedback, you guys. Quick reminder, please subscribe if you are not subscribed to the channel. Turn all notifications on. Please keep giving us this feedback. And Laura and I will make sure we do this. We'll do this again. Awesome, good. We're getting some great feedback with it. Peggy has a great question in terms of oftentimes it feels like there's very little negotiating in this market on residential properties. Yeah, that could be true. That that is true in a lot of scenarios. So many of them are one and done, highest and best, and very little back and forth. I'll give you my opinion on highest and best offers, you guys. I usually reject them. What I mean by that is if somebody says, hey, Caleb, give me your highest and best, I usually reject it and go at them really, really hard. What does it take for you to accept my offer today before the highest and best even have a chance to come in? So I hope that makes sense. I'll reject the highest and best and say, what does it take for my offer? And they might say 10 grand over my asking price, and say, okay, then I withdraw. Or they might say, 100,000, and my strike price, that number that I'm going to buy it at, might be 110. I'll be like, great, if I get you an offer for 100,000 right now, you guys will accept it. I try to be much more aggressive in those situations. Okay, fishing with a listing agent ahead of time often goes nowhere. Any advice on negotiating in this market when our buyers often won't get a second shot at it or be encountered? My only advice with that is with your buyers, make sure they know the market. You share with them what is happening, going, hey, you only have one shot at this, and then say, don't leave anything on the table. If you love the house, it's going to be your dream home. You're probably not going to get a second shot at it. You better put it all on the table. I'm not going to tell you what number to put. You put the number that you feel the most comfortable with, and then just like I do with myself, I don't let them get emotional with it. I say, what's your top number? I don't care what it is. I'm going to try to get everything less than that, but what's your top number? And they might say 180,000. That's the absolute most I'm going to pay. And then I say, great, we're going to go after it. But at the end of the day, you need to put all 180 on the table. That way, you gave it your best shot, and it avoids you getting into an emotional roller coaster and paying 200 for something that is only worth 180. So, what about trailer home rentals? I know some people that do incredibly well on trailer home rentals. I'm just not your guy for that, Jessica. So I would push you towards other people that's their specialty. I know some people that do really, really well with it, but I just want to make sure I'm transparent and going. The numbers, you look at the numbers, they're a lot like storage units. They can be amazing. But at the same time, that's a completely different business. And I don't want to mislead you on anything. So thank you for the question. All right, I think we're wrapping up with the questions. I think I'm going to end the live stream a few minutes early just because I have a noon I want to wrap up for. Thank you guys for tuning in, watching this. This is our first shot at it. Thank you for a few of the glitches that we had. Send us some messages. We'll try to do this again and hopefully add value to you guys and in your careers. I hope this helped you guys. So thank you all very, very much, and we'll see you the next time.